much for tuning in and all the support you gave us during the week. Thanks very much to Maximilian Kane for coming on last week talking about experimental films and the process behind it and being a film critic and all those things. Go back and listen to it if you haven't done so. And you can support us on Buy Me a Coffee. This week, our guest is the head of Autism Studies at University College Cork, and her name is Eleanor McSherry. How are you doing, Eleanor?
Hi, morning.
Good morning, and obviously, thank you very much for coming on. We will begin at the beginning, and the best place to start, I think. Can you give us a history of your upbringing, please?
Yeah, I'm Limerick born and bred. I'm based in Limerick for work as well, even though I'm in UCC. I'm based here, which I'm very lucky. I one of seven, 2 girls, 5 boys, so it was a bit of a madhouse. I come from a mixed family. My father's Leinster, my mother is Munster. We're a rugby household, so it was a very, very animated kind of a household. We converted him to Munster after 50 years, which was, I think, was pretty good. Our house is rugby, all kinds of sports. Every day of the week there was something on. There was hurling or there was soccer, whatever, but rugby was a bit of the graw. My cousin played for Ireland, so and my dad played tennis for Ireland, and my grandmother played golf for Ireland. So and I played chess for Limerick. So I mean that's about as far as my athletic ability went. But I grew up in a house that was immersed in strong traditional values, but also in the arts and in film, and that led me on to go and do my degree in media communications. I was a freelance journalist. I'm very, very heavily involved in the arts and in film in Limerick. But also I have a son who's autistic, and I ended up learning everything I could. So I ended up doing my master's looking at intellectual disability in a theoretical sense. And then I started lecturing, and I've been lecturing on autism studies, but I also develop and design programs with UCC.
So with your son being autistic, that's, one thing that would obviously lead you down the path to where you are now. And of course, like I can only imagine, I don't have kids, but, if someone's son or daughter, if they noticed something in them, and how did the process go for you getting your son diagnosed?
Yeah, this is a story I do tell my students, because I've developed a course in advocacy now as well, but I give the lecture on advocacy. I didn't know there was any issue. He was going to start school. He was quiet, he was gentle. I have 3 sons. He's the middle of the lot of them. The eldest fella was he's the one I should have really got tested for something, because he was putting toilet rolls down the toilet and everything. It's a typical boy. I grew up with 5 brothers, so it wasn't anything unusual to me. But he was nice, quiet, gentle, loved music. He was a little bit different, but everybody's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't have known any difference. Now, my father was an eye surgeon, and, my grandfather was an ear, nose and throat surgeon, and my brother's a doctor, but I mean, their area wasn't autism. So there was no indicator, but he started school and he reacted very badly to school. He started rocking underneath the chair with his hands over his head and blocking his ears the whole time and crying. And he really wanted to go to school. He was reading encyclopedias at 5. Okay, I know I should have probably guessed that was something unusual, but I just thought he liked learning, and I was really thrilled for that. But so the school said we can't have him on the premises. They were concerned that he's a flight risk. And I said, oh my God, okay. I thought that was a bit extreme, but they were concerned. And when he was stressed, he used to put his hand underneath cold water until his hands went blue. Literally blue. And he used to keep doing that and let the water flow over them. And so they said, look, so the principal at first said, maybe he's immature, but I said, no, that there's something not right about this reaction. This is very, this is outside the box. So we went to our GP, who referred us to mental health services. And we had this psychiatrist here in Limerick who kept saying, it's schizophrenia. And I was like, schizophrenia? He's 4. How the hell could you know schizophrenia at 4? Pardon for saying hell, but especially on the Lord's Day. But it's schizophrenia 4. And I was going, 4? How do you know that? So then she wouldn't talk to me. She kept talking to my husband like I wasn't in the room. So that really upset me. And she wanted to put him on medication. So I went home to my dad and I said, this is medication. What is it? And he says, it's an antipsychotic. And I said, but he's 4, Dad. And Dad goes, oh, wait a second now. That's not licensed to under 6s. Oh. So he said, I don't think you should be giving it to him. And I said, okay. So I went back to her. And again, she didn't talk to me. She talked to my husband, who's a teacher. And I said, this is not on. So I refused to give him the medication because I thought she was wrong. And not that I, used Dr. Google or anything. I just felt she was wrong. And then the psychiatrist changed. She went off to a different team, and we got a new psychiatrist who was an expert in autism, took one look at our fellow, went, oh no, he's autistic. And I said, what would have happened if he'd taken this medication? And she said he would have withdrawn into himself and gone completely the opposite of what he should be doing. So I was very, very annoyed about that. So that started our journey. We ended up on 18 months on a waiting list for services. And eventually we got one of these new childhood teams. They were being formed at the time, which is what we have now, but it's a multidisciplinary team. And so what happened was I decided to go back to college. I did adult education route. And I was going back for me to communications because I wanted something for myself while his journey was going through, and my parents supported me. They were fantastic. And then once he started getting services, I thought, this is great. He's getting services. We're laughing. We're on the road. And then the cuts came in 2006. And we suddenly had to fight every single year for every inch, every minute of his SNA hours, to get occupational therapist. He's 23 now. Mm-hmm. And in his 14 years of school, he never saw an educational psychologist. He was on the list, but never ever saw an educational psychologist, an EP psychologist. He saw 2 occupational therapists because they couldn't get them, and he had that's 2 appointments. So that's not as if it was an ongoing thing. And they say to me, how did you get him to tie his shoelaces? He didn't start tying his shoelaces until he was 16. And I said, perseverance, because I had no choice. Yeah. So I set up the Special Needs Parents Association in 2006 with 6 other parents in Ireland, and we ended up helping 57,000 families across Ireland by the time we finished. In 10 years, we had on social media, we just primarily supported. We were at the government table. We were in discussions for government policy, but we all burnt out because then regulation came in, and none of us were professionals. None of us wanted to charge our parents. We never had any CEOs, no buildings, no money, no staff, no nothing. We just were there to support other parents. But that's not the model that we have for charities anymore. So we all burnt out. And my journey in academia I did my degree, and then I went and did a master's, 4 years master's. And when I finished my 4 years master's, I started working with UCC in Autism Studies because my master, I looked at intellectual disability in the Irish educational system and the history of Irish education from 1870. But I looked at the culture, and our culture is particularly unique when it comes to disability. We're quite conservative and quite traditional, but we didn't have things like euthanasia. We didn't have things like forced abortions. We didn't have full institutionalization because we're a family-oriented country. So we supported people, keeping people. And it's funny that we look at the church in a very different way now. We say, oh God, they were terrible. They did abuse and all this kind of stuff. But they actually, from a disability point of view, if you were in the home, they supported you 100% with your child in the home. Yeah. And now that's patchy now. I know there's the horror stories there, but from my research, it's like a tale, 2 different, very, very different stories. If you're institutionalized, you were kind of a bit shagged. And if you were left at home, you were supported by your local priest and like that. So there's a lot, we've quite a checkered history with it, but that's what I studied. So then as I teach policy practice and law and representation in autism studies, and now I create courses for industry. I recently created, I created a course, a CPD in neurodiversity for the screen industry, the first of its kind in the world, university fully accredited, and a wellbeing coordinator course for the screen industry. and that will go and become accredited. So, and these are two first of their kind university-wise. So I've been invited to give talks in Switzerland, to the European Broadcasting Union, TG Cahir, RTE, Cartoon Saloon. I've been invited now to go to Ulster University and to give a workshop and a symposium supported by BAFTA. I mean, as a filmmaker, I want them to be watching my films. I don't want to be going giving talks, but this is, you just don't know where you're going to end up.
And I do actually have questions about that later on as well, because I'm a big film fan as well. So I was fascinated to learn that that's something that you did. I also wanted to ask you, kind of go back a little bit, because I think autism's pretty misunderstood by a lot of people, and I think mental health also is. When did you first become aware of mental health?
I had postnatal depression on my son with autism. It was very traumatic birth for me, and I suppose for him. And I don't know whether that has anything to do. I think his autism is genetic. I know all the different theories that are out there, and that's the one that I can see being the most valid for me. But I think that with autism, and this is a very personal view, but from reading everything that there's different causes, and this is what upsets everybody, because everybody has, I think there's a lot of validity with a lot of the theories that are out there, and I don't think it presents in any one particular way. I think when you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism. But it's become my life's work, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. I spoke at the Oireachtas at the Autism Strategy, and I was invited to speak, and I didn't want to say my son's story because he's 23 now. He can tell his own story. He's doing a diploma in archaeology with NUI Galway, and I was told he'd never even get, a junior cert. So I mean, to have a leaving cert and to go through mainstream school was a big deal. Tough, but he got there. But mental health is something that's very much on the horizon with autism, because we get a huge amount of young people with dual diagnosis. And I'll give you an example of what I say to my students. There is many different entry points to autism, and I'll explain what that is. If you're diagnosed at 4 years old, you never know any different. You're born that way. You're very strong in your self-identity. You're autistic. You know what the differences are. Your family know that, and they support you. When you get diagnosed at 13, you're going through hormones and self-identity. And this is where mental health can become an issue, because if you're now questioning yourself and you now think you're not normal, which is ridiculous, because there's no such thing as normal, by the way. I think that's a complete myth. There's medical normal, and that's okay, that's perfectly valid. But outside of that, I don't think it's a term that changes constantly all the time. So it's hard to keep a grasp of it. So at 13, it's a very, very tough time, and a huge amount of the kids, like my son came into second level and he'd issues, but he was already in a teen. So they were already, there was already people there to support him. There were psychologists or whatever, but there was kids in his class who were going through diagnosis who were freaked out completely by the term autism. See, my fella knew he was always autistic, so it was no big deal to him, but they were freaked out. They were upset. They started self-harming. Like it's a big deal at 13. Then you have somebody who's diagnosed in their 20s, and these people are quite angry. They're angry that nobody knew they were different. They always knew they were different. They always felt on the outside, and they felt excluded by society and didn't know why. And then suddenly they're told this, and it makes a bit of sense to them. But they're angry about it because they feel somebody along the line should have known, especially young women, because this is around the time when young women, and I was diagnosed 2 years ago myself with autism.
Oh, really?
So it explained all of my life and my mental health as well. So this in their 20s, but when you're diagnosed at my age, which I won't say what it is, I'll just say 1970s.
Okay, yeah.
That'll give you an indication. And obsessive about film and all that kind of stuff. It explained a lot of things in personal relationships. But for me, it's like, yeah, okay. It explains the weird. It explains a lot of things. It explains why I didn't feel like I fitted in. And that it's like, and the only way I can describe it is, it's like everybody has a rule book that you don't have. You don't know the rules of the game. It's like being thrust into the middle of a playing field and going, okay, and somebody gives you a responsibility, and you don't know the rules of the game, and everybody seems to know what's going on but you. And when you try and catch up with the rules of the game, you're demonized because you get them wrong or they're whatever. And it's a very tough journey. It's a very tough journey. But like, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't been on that journey. You know, I wouldn't care as much as I do. And I used to have this attitude, am I going to change the world for my kid to make it better so that there isn't kids coming through? And now I'm thinking, wait a second, everybody else has the rule book. Surely they should be changing it so he doesn't need the rule book.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the way I look at it now.
With the attachment of a label, like nobody likes to be labeled with anything, I suppose. Yeah. But it's interesting what you say about age, because I was diagnosed as bipolar. I think it was maybe 35, 34 maybe. And I don't think I cared too much about the idea that I was being labeled. No. If you or your son were being labeled as autistic, is that a problem for you?
No, never was. I grew up in a medical house. So, things like, and the way I described it to him when he started asking about it, he was only 6. And he said, your brother and myself have asthma. We have a breathing issue. And I said, you're autistic and you have a thinking issue. And he was fine with that. That's where he was at that time. That solved that. I mean, I've taught in mental health in the community, and we looked at concepts and the concepts of psychology and all that kind of stuff. And through the study and the research that I've done over the years, we have to accept that sometimes medical intervention is needed. But what that medical intervention, it should be a collaborative thing. But sometimes you're in a space where you don't know what you need and how you can help yourself. And to be able to make that distinction, because we put so much force on not wanting labels. We're labeled, everything is labeled, chair, table, person. Yeah. Like my son is, and I always start when I was invited to give a TED talk on this. Now it didn't end up happening because of COVID, but I was invited to give a TED talk about this journey. And I remember saying, my son has blue eyes. He has brown hair. He's autistic. He's got fair-skinned. He's Caucasian. He's Irish. This is all a part of who he is. Yeah. It's just as much a part of him as the color of his eyes are. So it's no difference. It's a part of who he is. Now, I did hear a senator who this is the reason I ended up on the autism strategy thing, is he said in the Senate that autism is a personality. It's a personality quirk, is the way he put it. And I said, that is so disingenuous to a mother who's sitting there with her nonverbal, very violent 13-year-old who's trashing the house, who's beating up their younger sister, who's beating up their parent every day, and telling them that that's a personality quirk is laughable to me. And maybe we don't know enough about the brain yet, and we're constantly learning, and that's fine, but we are where we are. And this is what we have now. And yes, there are medical realities to things, and we have to accept that, or else we're not going to help people. And for me, it's about helping people. And if there is medical things there, great. But not always. Like I was told, my son he went through a phase of suicidal ideation, and we brought him to the therapist, and they said, we're going to do a bit of behavioral therapy. I said, that's grand. Look, we'll see how it goes. It saved his life. Yeah. And yet when we teach ABA here in Ireland, there's a huge American ideology about ABA, that they misused ABA. We have a very different type of ABA in this country. And it's what we call an eclectic mix of interventions. And what we do is we have a little bit of ABA. It depends on the person. So a little bit of ABA, we might need a little bit of medical intervention, or, maybe pills, or for a certain length of time. And what it is it's suited to the particular child. In America, it's all or nothing. Yes. And people come in going, I get an awful lot of adults with autism going, ABA is bad. Well, ABA saved my son's life. Yeah. If he hadn't had, and he only had it for 6 weeks. And that's the kind of service that we have in this country. So it shows a lack of knowledge of what the system provides to children. And if you're diagnosed in your 20s and you're dictating to parents who have to live every single day with their child, it's very upsetting to them because they don't feel supported. Mm-hmm. Do we want to start shoving children into institutions because we give parents, and a lot of these parents are suffering, a lot of them have severe mental health issues, they have PTSD, and what we're doing is we're taking a swipe at them for a community that should support them. It's very sad. It is.
There's a lot of kind of common misconceptions about autism in general, and I think I've never worked with kids until maybe in the last 5 years. I've been teaching kids jiu-jitsu from the age of like 4
Oh,
to
brilliant.
to
Yeah,
8, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's brilliant. And like you mentioned earlier on,
Yeah.
everybody's different, and all the kids are
Mm,
different. And I
mm,
see in groups, because I had never seen kids in groups, just nieces and nephews and stuff. But
yeah.
um, one is really boisterous, while the other is quiet, and immediately. And you hear it in films, you hear it on TV and stuff.
Yeah.
Immediately, the autism thing is thrown there. Like, whereas somebody
Yeah.
might be just quiet, somebody mightn't make eye
Yeah.
contact with you, and all of a sudden we're straight away labeling with it. And it does happen a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yes and no. Like it depends on who you're talking to and where you're
Yeah.
based and all that kind of stuff. Um, like there was a phase there in about 2010, 2012, where there was accusations coming from government and from the Department of Education that every single child was being sent for a diagnosis, and they were getting these diagnoses and they were bullying GPs. I knew no parent bullying for a label. Nobody wants a label for their
Mm.
child. I mean, that was ridiculousness. But there was an accusation made there. And there are parents out there who will push for a diagnosis and who will bully. But there were very, very small groups of that, because for a long time there is a stigma attached to any kind of label.
Yep.
Nobody wants a kind of label. My attitude was I wanted my child to get helped. I didn't care whether they said he was a member of Sesame Street,
Yeah.
as long as he got the help that he needed at the time that he needed. And I was very lucky that he did, but I had to sit. I remember one time I rang the Athlone Department of Education, and they said to me, your son could lose his SNA this year, but we can't tell you until September. Now, this is May. So I said, do you know what? And I didn't drive at the time. And I said, do you know what? I said, I'll come and I'll help you. I'll bring the kids. We'll get the bus to Athlone. Now, I said, whereabouts in Athlone are you? Because I said, I'm looking at a map here on Google, so I'm not exactly sure. And they were like, sorry, you're going to, no, you don't have to come here. Oh, but I do, because, you don't know if you can tell me, and I can't wait till September.
Yeah.
So I think if I sit there, it'll keep it in the forefront of your mind if you have to look at my face. I didn't actually end up going to Athlone, but I got an answer in half an hour. And, but no parent should have to do that. But you see, you know what I mean? I couldn't work. I was lucky in that respect. Now, I did sit out in a HSE office for 4 hours one morning waiting for a report, because it took them 6 weeks for this report, and I needed it for him to go to secondary school. So I sat out with a flask and a book. And they came out. They eventually got it for me in those 4 hours, because they knew I wasn't going anywhere. Like, so, I mean, but no parent should have to do that. And I don't advocate for them having to do that, but that's why we did what we did.
And it's like, it's brilliant. And like, there's nothing wrong with going for a trip to Athlone either. It's a lovely town, if you don't mind.
This is it. It was, and I told them I was bringing the 3 kids with me. And I said they were all under, what was it? They were 14, 13, and 12 at the time. So I said, look, and they'll do the homework. I said, don't worry, they'll do the homework. Like, I mean, I often found that being perfectly calm and perfectly reasonable, and that's why I teach advocacy now. We're putting together an advocacy course, but I'm teaching advocacy to people who are youth and community workers and health services and teachers and stuff like that, of how to, there's a lack of understanding of how to advocate for a child in your class when they're not your own. Mm-hmm. And how to remove the emotion from it, and how to navigate that space. Now, parents will be in the room as well. That's why I love what I do, because the groups that I teach are in adult education and continuing professional development. So you get a mixed bag in the room. So you get people from all different walks of life, and they all help each other. And it's great because they're all on the same level. The teacher, the resource teacher, the parent, the autistic person are all in the same classroom. And it's a very interesting dynamic, and they learn from each other. And when I did mental health in the community, it was the same. I had parents who had lost their children to suicide. And I had members of the HSE, and I also had people who had gone through suicide prevention and have gone on to actually develop suicide prevention services themselves since the course. But they were in the same room. So when we were talking to each other, you could empathize with somebody.
Yeah.
You see, I can go to training in the HSE and meet other people like myself, but that doesn't mean I meet somebody who's suicidal and who's going through that and saying, no, this isn't, I'm in distress and I'm coming into you and you're asking me to fill in bloody forms. I can't even think, let alone fill in a form. They're going, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. Do you know what I mean? And it sounds stupid, but it is, until you're actually sitting in front of somebody who's gone through that. It's very, very difficult to imagine it.
Yeah, like I remember when I was quite unwell, and that's a great point about, the real logistics of just everyday, you said filling out forms, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And your brain can't compute the idea that, you have to put pen to paper and everything. And
Yeah.
that's a lovely idea that everybody's in a room together, because not until, like, I can speak to people on the podcast here and tell people about it, and they'll be interested, because to them that's just such a foreign idea that I couldn't even think of filling out a form, And to have that kind of community action group going on, I think it definitely should be happening more often.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, UCC, the Adult Education Department is 75 years old, and it's growing from strength to strength. And we provide short courses, but we give you a university accredited qualification, which is the fantastic part about it. And we're developing them the whole time. I'm trying to develop one for carers now at the moment, because you're coming out from caring, let's say 20 years. I have parents who lost their children in COVID, and they come out of 20 years of caring. They've no occupation.
Mm-hmm.
They've no, like, their whole life was that. Like, I mean, and I've been there, and your identity's gone. You've no identity. You're basically somebody's mother, and then all of a sudden you're not that person's mother. Like, and we still run our online support group, and parents say to me, "Oh, my child's dead. I can't be here." So why can't you be here? Mm-hmm. You've experienced that. There's parents going through that at the moment. You have a valid, your life did not mean nothing. This journey did not mean nothing. You've that opportunity to share it and help a parent at the start of their journey.
Yeah.
And so they feel there's somebody walking with them, rather than being isolated and alone. And that's the great thing about the virtual world now, is that I can talk to you here. Like, if this would have been unheard of 4 years ago,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like, we wouldn't have dreamed of doing this. I would have had to go to a studio somewhere. I mean, and I've traveled to go into studios to give talks, predominantly about film, because that's my other part of my life. But now I'm given the golden opportunity where I work to combine my two loves, mm-hmm. which is, disability and mental health, and film, which is just amazing to be able to do that. It's a gift. It's an absolute gift.
Where does this continued drive for knowledge, and learning come from? Because you're doing a PhD now as well.
Yeah. When I got my leaving cert, I had a great leaving cert year. Fantastic. I partied till the cows come home, because suddenly I cottoned on to part of the rules of the world, and I met some really good friends, and I had a great year, but I didn't get a great leaving cert. So I ended up going out and working, and I met my husband and everything, and I started having children. But the agreement was always, if I stayed at home, I could go and do further education. So I did a foundation course in Mary Immaculate College. And I thought, I'm actually not bad at this, I mean, this is, when I was in secondary school, I didn't have a bog's notion what was going on. I was always kind of academic. I was a nerd, but I wasn't a good nerd, if you get me. I couldn't do exams, whatever. Now, I didn't know now. I know now why I wasn't good at that, because it was the 70s and 80s, and those kind of people like me we were in the system, but nobody knew we were there, that kind of way. But so I went back, and I was actually quite good. And then I decided, okay, I'll try and do a degree. And I sat down with the family, and everybody was very supportive and helped collect the kids. And Mary, it's only a couple of hours a week, and I worked around it, and I got my degree, and I went, oh my God, this is brilliant. This is amazing. So I was sitting down, and I thought I might see, I was a carer, so I couldn't go out and work. I can't work 9 to 5 anyway. So I couldn't go back full time. So, but I actually really enjoyed what I did. So I went to the philosophy department. I ended up doing, and I'll give you the full title, a Foucauldian discourse analysis, looking at the concept of intellectual disability in the history of the Irish educational system. And it's can't even look at it now. 60,000 words in 4 years of my life. But then I started, I was tutoring as well. I won a scholarship, and I started tutoring. And for somebody who the educational system didn't particularly suit, this really was fantastic. I loved it. And so then when I went in to have a talk, somebody had heard about me, because I'm on the radio an awful lot here in Limerick. I'm on the national radio. I'm on TV and stuff like that for advocating for my son. So I thought I was having a chat with somebody from UCC, and they offered me a job. And I was like, I thought I was helping them to bring their course to Limerick. And I was like, oh yeah. And they said, you've got the job. I said, what job? And they said, lecturing. I said, lecturing on what? And they said, on the Autism Studies. I said, oh my God, okay. I never, like, I'd done that I taught philosophy to primary school teachers, like, I taught ethics to primary school teachers and to the BAs, and I just, okay, this is really amazing. And so, yeah, like, it was just, I just enjoy research. Because I had to do it for my son, and you kind of get in that mode. Every day you see new articles, you have to find out who's written it, and you learn those skills that you learn as a carer. You never lose, and a lot of them are very, very similar to doing a PhD. And then, so I got the master's. I thought I was doing a PhD, but it was interdisciplinary, and my supervisor got I was a catalogue of disasters. My supervisor got a heart attack, and then I went up, and I didn't get to move up to the PhD level because it was such a different area, because it was philosophy and it was education, and nobody really wanted to handle it. Like, nobody knew. It was quite a different thing. And so and then I came out. I was quite burned by the whole experience, and I was still working with UCC. So I was at one stage, I was doing part-time hours with UCC on Autism Studies, mental health in the community, and I was also working with Limerick College of Further Education in nights, teaching night classes in creative writing, journalism, and okay, there was something else there: creative writing, journalism, and teaching short film script writing. And for 10 years I'd been doing that part-time anyway with the Limerick Writer Centre. And then I ended up a couple of years later, so I came up with a plan for looking at autism and television drama, because there was a mad amount of autism shows around, but there was none in Ireland. I was going, what's wrong with Ireland that we can't produce scripts on this? So I wanted to look at them and look at case studies and everything, but it took me 8 years to get supervisors because nobody wanted to touch it. The film knew lots about film and TV, but nobody knew anything about autism, and the crowd in autism knew nothing about film and television, but I knew about both. So that's what I did, and that's why I was able to develop these courses, because I knew there was a gap in the market. But I also supervise with primary and secondary educational students in their dissertation in special education with Hibernia College as well, which was, and I'm on the ethics committee there. But it's being interdisciplinary. You don't fit in any particular department, but it's perfect for what I do now.
Right.
So it's a particular drive in me. I like to, and I don't know whether it's maybe it's the autism, I don't know, but I like to know things. You know what I mean? I have a t-shirt. We went to the Game of Thrones exhibition because my son, for his 21st, he didn't want to party, obviously being autistic. So what we did is we did a tour we went to Birr Castle to look. He's mad into science, and so he did Leaving Cert biology and history. Loved history and geography, higher level, and he's just has this drive for this. So we went there. We went to the Military Museum in Cavan. We went to the Titanic, we went to a military museum. And so this is over, and we did this tour of Ireland looking at historical stuff. And so and to Newgrange, and he got to drive a tank. I mean, come on. Yeah. And his brothers were thrilled, but like, best 21st ever. But the whole thoughts of it freaked him out. And then we went across the border. He was like, oh my God. He's a list of countries that he doesn't want to visit in the world because of things. I said, why don't you want to go to New Zealand? He said, now, Mom, off the coast of New Zealand is the ring of whatever volcanoes. And then in Australia, it's and then he didn't want to go to France for a long time because of terrorism. He's a big YouTuber, like, he loves the YouTube and stuff. Like, he's just, it's amazing. I learn an awful lot from him every day, and I learn as much about myself as I do about him, because I'm discovering the things that I knew. Like, I mean, I taught autism for 12 years, like, and I'm learning stuff about it now in a different way, because now it applies to me, and I'm going, oh, maybe that. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like,
it's very interesting to think of it that way, which I guess it's the same thing as what I was saying. If you're not in it, like, you'd never see it. But can you tell me a little bit about, like, neurodiversity on screen, because this is a happy accident, because I want, I was having you on to talk about the autism studies, and then I find out this part of it, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah. What happened was in September 2001, I got contacted. A friend of mine, because I'm involved with film and stuff. She's a writer for animation, Lindsay Cedric, and she's written the first. She came up with the concept of the first child with Down syndrome that was in an animation, and a series that's on RT and by, I think it's Cartoons, Eleanor Brownbag or one of those did it, and she came up with that concept. And she said to me, can you come in and have a chat? They want to run a set of workshops. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll come in and have a chat. Because she said, look, you can advise. And I said, that's brilliant. So I came in and had a chat, but they had Googled me since. And they kept saying, are you the Eleanor McSherry for this? Yeah. Are you the Eleanor McSherry for this? Yeah. Are you the Eleanor McSherry for this? Yeah, that's me too. And they were, but okay. So they didn't realize that. But this is like, I don't know where the drive came from. I suppose being a carer, I just didn't want to sit at home and feel like when he was in school that I was sitting at home. I'm not that kind of person. That drives me nuts. So I had this chat, and then at the end of it, they went, actually, can you run the seminar? Can you suggest some people? I said, yeah, that's grand. I know a couple of autistic film script and directors and producers and actors and stuff like that. So I brought those people in, who had only met through the start of my PhD, because I wanted to interview them, to say, why do they feel Ireland doesn't have the service? So it was happenstance. And then we did the seminar in October, and they came back and they said, oh, wouldn't it be great? Like, if we had a meteor training. And I said, I can design a course. I said, where I work, they're very open to that. And look, I can go and ask, and all they can do is say is no. So then we ran a pilot last March, and we brought in, and we had people like operation managers from broadcasters. We had heads of production from animation. We had a couple of actors. We had a couple of screenwriters. So it's built specifically for the industry. So what it is it's a 12-week course, fully funded by Screen Ireland. If you have an interest in film, even you can do it. And it's fully funded. It's actually advertising at the moment, so yay. And it's fully accredited, so you get a university accreditation in it. The reason it's so important is nobody's doing it.
Yeah.
And if you look, and my area is policy and practice, so I research, and it's really, really, since COVID, there's a massive amount of policy coming out, especially in the UK, not as much in Ireland, but especially in the UK now, for film and for broadcasting, on disability and neurodiversity. Since Jack Thorne gave a talk at the Edinburgh Festival, he ended up winning, and he got to give the keynote speech, and he was talking about he's after being diagnosed with autism, interestingly, but he was giving a talk about being a screenwriter, writing all these fantastic shows, and not giving jobs to people with disabilities. And he has a degenerative disability. And he suddenly realized, once that started happening, that all of the people, you start seeing people, it's like having a prism being shown up to you and going, oh my God. And he's saying, we're really, really bad at it. And he said, I'm part of the problem. I'm in those production meetings. I can bring these people in. So he's fighting for that there. And I thought that was brilliant. So that was the one thing I showed him. So the production, then somebody said to me, the European Broadcasting Union, why can't you come and give a workshop to them? And they said, oh, look, we'd like you to do our website for us and to talk to us about guidelines. And I was kind of going, okay, I'm not sure I'm really qualified to do that. But okay, I am qualified to do it. But it's just this sense of panic. These are big, European broadcast, and all that kept going through my head the whole way through the conversation. Don't say Eurovision, don't say Eurovision, don't say Eurovision, don't say Eurovision, because that's all I thought.
Yeah.
That's what it came into my head. And then it's like it's a set of dominoes. We're now in talks at the Galway Film Fla. We're like, it's just, and as a filmmaker, my mind is blown to people who are coming to me now, people who wouldn't even reply to my emails when I'm as a screenwriter, people who I'm in the room with, people who I wanted to meet, and they're now on my course. And it's like the sense of power. But it's absolutely amazing. I gave a workshop to all of the crew and writers and animators for Cartoon Saloon.
That's
and
amazing.
I was kind of going, I'm such a fan. But I just said at the end, obviously I compose myself, I'm a professional. But at the end, I was going, I'm such a fan. I love what you do. And you know, I love animation because I think it gets to the heart of children. And I said the fact that my niece sits down and her favorite character is an ice cream that talks, like, it just amazes me, the child in me. And you know, and I just think that, yeah, it's such a privilege to do what I'm doing, and this and the wellbeing coordinator course, because they came back this round so well, and the template was now there. And I didn't realize I was the first one in my job to do this kind of, to design and whatever, like in-house. Like they normally come to us with an idea. It was me who came with an idea. And so now there's a template there for, and the wellbeing coordinator, like in 3 days. And this is a completely new role for Irish, and it's in light of the Me Too movement. It's in light of the massive amount of suicides and mental health issues within the media industry. And it's hopefully going to be part of the Safe to Create policy that's out there now, and working with Minding Creative Minds. And they said to me, could you put something together for this? And I said, okay, great. And I went to a psychotherapist. And the great thing about my job is I can go to somebody at UL and go, you're the expert in this. Can you help involve in that? I can go to somebody in Trinity and whatever like that. I'm not confined to a department.
Yeah.
I'm confined within adult education, because I can pay them for 2 hours of work or 2 classes or whatever. So they don't have to be contracted with UCC. So I can get the top people, which I did. So I got a pile of psychotherapists. Our courses are embedded in a department. I got somebody. So, and this course, the wellbeing coordinator, is anchored in mental health, nursing, and film. Like that doesn't happen every day. Like it's just cool. And in 3 days, for 20 places, we had 60 people apply. Wow. And 20% of those came from Northern Ireland, which was just mind-blowing. And so now I'm in talks with SIP2, BEC2, Prospect, all of these unions, and with Screen Northern Ireland and with BAFTA and the BFI, talking about, because it's an internationally recognized thing. So and because it's online and because it's recorded, that if you're on set in America, you can still use the online platform and be in class, and you can see the class and you can interact with people, and you can do, so it's cool. And it's really, it's breaking. For me, it's having been involved in the industry for a very long time and seeing this toxicity, to be able to be a part of some of the change is really cool. It's
amazing. I was reading up about it, and obviously the vast array of you know, in neurodiversity in general, the vast array of people that be represented is amazing. And you know, I was supposed to do it about a year ago, and it's kind of a daunting experience, but I'd written out 20 films to do with mental health, or characters that, you know, had mental health issues in the films. And I wrote them all down now, and I have to go and, you know, rewatch the films. I'd seen them all. And I was trying to think of like how well mental health was portrayed on screen, and how many times they, you know, overdo it to make it more dramatic and things like that. What do you see as how mental health, or you know, or even autism, was probably shown less, is represented on films, and is it done well?
Well, see, there's two rules of thumb on this. Like, I've taught this a very long time, and when I came in, I was very much, we have to be authentic. But then I was thinking, if we want equality in disability, authentic is being the bad guy. Mm-hmm. Authentic is being, because there are people who are like that. You know, being authentic is, because if we're all individuals, we can all be the bad guy or the good guy. It's just not all of the time. It's moving away from the stereotype, but giving, because you're not going to show everything of autism or everything, certainly not of neurodiversity. Mm-hmm. And it's always in a medical setting, by the way. Neurodiversity is always portrayed in a medical setting. But this is my area of study. I've studied a massive amount of this. And, you know, I've suddenly realized that we're never going to be authentic, because there's no such thing as one type of autism or one type of mental health issue. But I have a right, we talked about it because we wanted to. I have a short film that is one shortlisted for multiple awards, but never been made, which is bonkers. Like it's 10 years, that's 12 years. Actually, no, I think it's 14 years. It's been shortlisted for all of these funding awards, and every single time it was like, oh, you don't have the right producer, or I don't like your lead actor, or I don't like your cinematographer. I don't think it was never the script, which drove me nuts. And so we're making it ourselves anyway. And I brought together a fantastic team, but we're a very, very diverse team, not by choice or design. It's just, it ended up happening that way. I was diagnosed as autistic. I didn't know for all those 14 years I was autistic. And what we were doing is we were talking about casting. And there's these new casting rules that, that to try and put somebody with a disability who's disabled in there. And we were saying, but it has to be about the relationship of the two characters, the mother and the son, or the mother and daughter, or the mother, do they have a disability? It's not important whether they do or they don't. Yeah. It's about their familial relationship. And that's the way of having a diversity casting. It's not about putting down on a sheet of paper that the person has to be autistic. It's putting down on the sheet of paper, if you are autistic, you can apply too. Or if you have cerebral palsy, you can apply. It's about the relationship, and it's about, because people with cerebral palsy also can be autistic, or ADHD also can be autistic, or you know what I mean? It's about the character. Can you portray that character? Whether you're a boy or a girl, whether you have a disability or not a disability, whether you are one gender or the other, or if you're transgender or whatever, it's about the character. And the same for the parent. It could be a grandparent. It's about that relationship. And this is the way that we should, I think. But there are, in films, it's acting. Do you know? And I listened to, oh God, what's his name? He played Gandalf.
Ian McKellen.
Ian McKellen came out with a thing saying, if we start telling actors that they cannot play any role, we are confining them to play caricatures or stereotypes. I am a man who is gay. I'm homosexual. Can I not play the love interest? Because I'm an actor. I can play straight. I can play a woman. I can play whatever. It's not disingenuous to womanhood, because it's about the character, because I'm an actor. I think we forget about that. And I think we're going down an area that if we do confine, it's about getting rid of all barriers. And if we're going to get rid of all barriers, there will be a period of time where we will have these quotas and we will have these rules and regulations. But I think that we will, in order to get to that point of all barriers being broken down, where we will be able to cast and anybody can come in and feel comfortable coming in and confident coming in. They mightn't get the role, but confident coming in and not worried that this on my CV is going to stop me from doing that. We've actors over the years who say I can ride horses and they go and they can't ride at all. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And I know it's probably oversimplifying it, but having studied it, I don't think it is. And I don't think we're going to get to authenticity, because it's acting, it's a story, it's talking about a story. And I mean, we're Irish people. So Irish people never tell the same story twice. Do you know what I mean? We embellish the facts. So if I want to go in and be entertained, I want to be able to look at it and feel, I'm not going into a documentary. If I go into a documentary, I expect there's a certain level of truth to it. But when I go in and I see a character, now, again, as I said, there's a fine line between good character and stereotype. Yeah. And we've got to stop stereotyping. It's easy, it's simple, but it's stereotyping. And I think once we start moving away from that, I mean, there's some fantastic short, young people and people who are new to the industry, people like yourself and myself, who are out making fantastic films in short film and some features as well, with wonderfully, brilliantly written characters that'll never see the light of day because they want the stereotype. They want the, you know what I mean? Like, I remember pitching to RTE at one stage about doing a series with the lead actor who's Down syndrome, and basically been told, oh, well, we're kind of doing a lot of that kind of disabled stuff. So, there probably is a place for it, and it sounds like a fantastic idea, but just not for today, because we've already filled our quota. And I was like going, oh my God, this is what we've come to. And that will happen as well. And then maybe we should be going over that hill and going, accepting everything because it's a good story. That's what I believe.
Exactly. Yeah, the idea of they had a quota for disabilities is
Oh, yeah. They got
extraordinary,
funding
really.
for it, you see. That's the problem with having funding
Right.
for it, you see. If they want 20% of the funding for something, once they reach that 20%, there's a reluctance there. And there is logistical issues and there is things like that, but they're not as, like, especially neurodiversity. Like the guys say to me, I give them a whole lecture about how to accommodate people with neurodiversity. And, you know, mental health is one part of neurodiversity as well. And um and I give them, and they go, oh my God, that's so simple. I said, but it is simple.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, it's yes, there can be accommodations that cost money, but I mean, most of the apps now for disabilities and neurodiversity are free.
Yeah.
Woohoo! We've
Yeah.
iPads, we've phones, like, and simple things like color coding stuff for somebody with dyslexia, not putting too much in an email. It's not rocket science, but they just didn't know. And
Yeah.
that's why they come on the course, because they learn.
Course. So it would be remiss of me, because anytime I get someone who's into films on the show, I kind of have to ask them maybe for a couple of their favorite films.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's a tough one.
It
And I
is.
always do it to my film students. Is the first lecture. It's like, go, what's your name? What's your favorite film? They all go,
Yeah.
oh, and they frantically start writing. My favorite film is John Ford film called How Green Is My Valley.
Oh, all right. That is a
Yeah,
great
it's
film.
absolutely, man. When I went in to do my primary degree, myself and my buddy, we were two mature students, and there used to be screenings every week in film history. And we used to bring in popcorn and M&Ms and everything, and we used to share them. And they used to go, the mammies are in, because we'd have loads of sweets. But this was our whole, I mean, this was a dream. My homework was to watch films. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I have every bit of technology here. I absorb films. I love Marvel. I love DC. I love, it'd actually be easier to ask me what I don't like. I mean, I love every sci-fi. I have, like, other people spend on like really expensive holidays. We've Netflix, we've Paramount, we've Amazon, I fell out of love with Apple for a while,
Right.
because I was kind of going, oh, do I really want to be spending money? Like when I was a carer at home, like films were my life. But when I was little, on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon, I'd sit down and watch films from the 1950s and musicals. I love musicals. And The Greatest Showman is another one. And you know, the way it's like, I give a little spiel at the beginning of it. It was for an ad for Sky Movies. And I think it was Al Pacino says it. And it's about sitting there and you want a little bit more. And I say to students, if you can make somebody come out and feel, it doesn't matter what they feel after film. Now, if it's mad because it's bad, that's nothing I can do about that. But like, if they feel something, you've done your job. And when I my first documentary, it was about autism, and it was a college thing. And we went in for the screening and everybody else was watching it. And I sat and I watched everybody else's face. I wanted to see their reactions. And it was the greatest buzz of my absolute life to watch my film on a big screen, but also to watch the audience reactions. It was the most amazing thing. And I've had that experience a couple of times since, but nothing is like your first. When you see people were crying watching it, because at the beginning we had all the technical information. And at the end of it, with the parents. And I was saying, this is what autism is, but this is what it really is. And people were crying because they were hearing parents saying, I love him. I just want the world to be nicer to him. And it was just such an amazing feeling to see people. And people were texting me going, you made my mom cry in the class. But it's such an amazing film, documentary. And it wasn't particularly brilliant. It was just the fact that you made people feel. And I think if we can do that as filmmakers and as creators, and I think, like I always say, the arts equalizes. For me, because when I go into and this is why I'm so passionate about what I do, we are the creators. We create the culture that people watch every day. We change people's minds and we change their hearts. And if we don't do our job properly, we have people coming out with a skewed idea of who we are as a people. And they'll live on when we have passed on our films. And we have a duty to make sure that we do the best that we possibly can do and represent the world in a way. And look, we can do whatever we like. That's what I love about film, is that I said, I always say to the short film things, you can write about anything. That's what's so amazing about what we do, except for the fact that somebody has to pay for that. So just remember that if you put in aliens, somebody has to go and figure out how to film that. So just be very aware of your poor producer. But it's such a fantastic thing to do. But I mean, we should be welcoming of people who are neurodiverse. We should be welcoming people with mental health issues. We should be welcoming of everybody. And it's not much to ask. It's not much. If we have a wellbeing coordinator on set, if somebody is having a breakdown, they can get them the help. They can refer them on and get them the help that they need. And that person doesn't need to get to a point where something bad happens.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've been on set with a producer, writer, director who had a nervous breakdown and the whole film shut down and it was never made. But we didn't know how to help him. And to be doing what I'm doing now is just so cool. And I know I'm not a psychotherapist. I can't teach the course, but I can certainly bring those people together in the room to help other people to do it.
I just want to make a point about How Green Was My Valley, because it's just because I love the film, right? I found not so long ago, I watched it years ago, but I found not so long ago this really beautiful like hardback copy of the book. So I bought it for like €2. And it's great. But the thing about How Green Was My Valley, it must be the most unlucky film, the fact that everybody just says, oh, well, it beat Citizen Kane for the Oscar for Best Picture. And that's all it seems to be talked about. But when you look at it, you kind of go, well, so like, it's not that bad of a show. Like Citizen Kane's a great film. But it's almost like there's a snooty idea around How Green Was My Valley now because it was the one that beat, the most, and I just think it's amazing.
It's one of the best films Maureen O'Hara was in, for example. And Roddy McDowall was in it. But for me, it showed out of all of Ford's films, his Irishness, even though it was Wales.
Yeah.
It was a family sitting down. I grew up with, and there were 7 of us. It typically showed an Irish family. I remember going to a symposium, an academic symposium, and coming into the academia later in life, I have a very cynical view of education anyway. And I came in and they were talking, oh, no, there's this French expert there. And I'm Ford, and he goes, nobody knows why he depicted the family in this way. And I put up my hand and he was like, and he wouldn't, he kept blah, blah, blah. And then he came back and he goes, yes. And I said, it's a typical Irish family. Everybody sitting around the table, everybody having their place, everybody shouting, everybody speaking at the same time. That's where my family came from. And it was Irish, and it was very typically Irish. And having the one daughter, and she's the one who has to mind. I said, the whole thing was Irish. And it was just about mining, and it was about community, but it was more Irish, I think. And it's probably quite a Celtic thing, maybe. The Welsh and the Irish are very, very similar. But for me, out of all of his films, and even the ones he made in Ireland, out of all of his films, it was the most Irish for me because it showed every single drip out of it was Irish, every single, and it was that kind of in adversity. This, and I don't want to ruin the film for anybody, but like the end of it, for me, I bawled at the end of it. But the fact that you had this whole community, and that's the way it was, and nobody was outside of the community, and leaving was really leaving, and you know what I mean? And somebody who had, and the whole idea with the priest and everything, and this whole, that was really, you couldn't have got more Irish than that, but yet it was Welsh. And I think the reason that it did win the Oscar was it was beautifully shot.
Yeah, it was.
The acting in it was top notch. But it was about, I think it was also the time that it won the Oscar. It was a time of questioning of values and American society and Irish society. Like, I mean, there's 680% more Irish people claiming to be Irish in America than there is in Ireland. They're like, if they've 680% more of our population living in America than living here. That's why they don't want to give them a vote for the presidential election. But I think that film very much epitomized Ford. And I think that if I was ever to remember for anything, I don't remember, even though the Westerns were basically his bag, for me that film is John Ford. And I think it shows, it sums him up.
I agree, it's brilliant. This seems like a ludicrous question to ask you, Eleanor, because I ask everyone this, but after telling us all the stuff that you do, what do you like to do in your spare time?
Watch films.
Exactly.
That's basically it. Watch films. I love, I've a notebook here, and this notebook has everything I want to watch on Netflix, because I flick around and then I sit down, and my Saturday is when I'm not doing my PhD. My Saturday is normally my PhD day, but Sunday is my family day. And I sit and I just watch films, Netflix series. And I also, because I go on the radio here in local radio, and I review films. I wrote for Film Ireland for 10 years as well. I was their Midwest correspondent. So I reviewed films. Like I used to go at the Kerry Film Festival when my friend Maeve McGrath, she's the head of now of Galway Film Fla programmer, but she was down in Kerry. And I'd come down to see it, but I'd review all the films. So I'd sit inside a cinema and watch 12 hours of films.
Wow.
and review them, and because I love film, and that's my downtime, that's my escapism. And I read a lot as well. I read a lot of David Eddings, Tolkien, all of that, and that's how I bring my brain away, because as a child I was a bit of an odd kid, but that's how I read and I watched film and TV, and that was my passion and my love, and that's how I get through the day. And in my darkest hour, I do that and listen to music as well. I as I said to you earlier, I walk an awful lot as well. But I think about films and I talk to other people about films, and and thankfully to God, I know a lot of film people. So we talk about films. So we meet up, we talk about Netflix and, a lot of it. And I research it. So now it's part of my job, which is
that's amazing.
What I mean? And I get up every day. And my father was an eye surgeon. And he said, if you can get up every day and love what you do, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter, whatever, that's what you want.
Absolutely. Eleanor, you've been an absolutely fascinating guest.
Oh,
it was a genuine, honestly, it was a genuine pleasure to listen to you. And thank you for being so open and honest. If you don't mind, could you stick around for a minute? I'll close it out. We'll get a quick photo and we'll go about our Sundays.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Thank you very much. Okay. So I also have to thank John for all his technical wizardry that I can't do. I always thank my mum, my dad, my granddad, Jared and Calvin. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and all the podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, if I can say it. Obviously, thanks to everyone for watching or listening or whatever they did. And once again, Eleanor, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And next week, we'll be talking to, I don't know, someone else. I'll have to find someone. Okay, thanks, everyone. See you again. Bye.